Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cherry Bekaert's Government and Public Sector podcast. My name is Danny Martinez, a partner here with Cherry Bekaert, and I lead our CFO Advisory practice for the industries of state and local government, higher ed, and not-for-profit. And I am pleased to finally, and it's on me, finally be getting to you all with our GASB 103 implementation series. If you joined our webinar in January, you heard a little bit about the standard and how we work through implementation. And so what we're going to be doing throughout this three-part series is we're going to be covering the biggest changes in GASB 103 financial reporting model improvements and sharing a little bit more about what we're seeing as we go through these implementations. As always, I have guests here to kind of help us break down the standard and implementation. Scott Anderson and Mike Brotherton are here with me today. Scott, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Danny, for having me on your show. My name is Scott Anderson. I have been with Cherry Bekaert for almost 21 years now. I'm sitting in the Raleigh office. Also spent some time down in our Tampa practice, and then a couple of years at the GASB as a practice fellow. And I oversee I'm the technical director for our government audit practice. And so I spend a lot of time doing quality reviews and answering technical questions amongst our audit teams.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for joining again. And we have a new guest, first time on our podcast series. He is a senior manager in group. Mike, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me, Danny. Mike Brotherton, I'm part of Danny's team, the CFO Advisory side. I've been working with governments for 15 years now, and I'm located in the Houston area.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. All right, so let's get going. So this first part, we are going to be focused on specifically on the management's discussion and analysis and what is changing, what is being emphasized, how to think about the process of improving your MD&A through the implementation of GASB 103. So to get started, Scott, can you share a little bit, from your background of what the GASB was attempting to do with these MD&A changes?
Sure. So you hear words thrown around: refresh, re-emphasize, reset, re-level it. There are different types of users of financial statements, and if you read some of the concept statements, there's really two broad categories of users of the financial statements. And concept statement 3 talks about users of your basic financial statements and refers to them as being responsible for obtaining a reasonable understanding of government accounting and finance, as well as studying those financial statements with a reasonable diligence and applying relevant analytical skills. And then when you look at what the MD&A is targeting, what audience the MD&A is targeting, it's in the MD&A should be written in a manner that can be understood by users who do not have a detailed knowledge of governmental accounting and financial reporting. So the MD&A should include explanations and interpretations that help people understand the information that's provided. So with that in mind, the GASB understands that there are some users of the financial statements that will only read the management's discussion and analysis. If they look at anything else, they might not understand what they're looking at. And so there's a lot of reliance on the MD&A. But over the years, the MD&A has gotten a little bit stale for a lot of our governments. A lot of roll forward, a lot of boilerplate, a lot of description of changes without an explanation as to why. And so this was an opportunity to re-emphasize the point of the MD&A and add importance to the information to certain users of our financial statements.
Perfect. And within these changes going from GASB 34 to GASB 103, one of the things that they're doing is they're changing the categories. So you had 8 sections within GASB 34, and those are cut down to 5 broad categories within 103. Mike, can you share with our audience what those 5 categories are? Explain maybe what's being changed or emphasized within each of these sections of the MD&A. And then Scott, please jump in as well with any feedback you have.
Happy to. So the 5 sections are going to be your overview of the financial statements, financial summary, detailed analysis, your significant capital asset and long-term financing activity, and then currently known facts, decisions, and conditions. One thing to keep in mind with this is the MD&A must be presented in this order and must only present information within these 5 categories now. If you're wanting to report information outside of these sections, it should be reported elsewhere and not in the MD&A. So that could be in the transmittal letter, other supplementary information, or a separate report. So you'll notice one of the biggest changes that the budgetary information is being taken out of the MD&A, and that'll have its own section in the RSI now and have notes to RSI where you can discuss that. So let's jump into the first section, the overview of the financial statements. Here you're going to provide an overview of the basic financial statements, including the relationship of the statements to each other. What GASB wants you to do here is explain government-wide versus fund financial statements. You want to focus on the different types of information in the financial statements and the relationship of those statements to each other. You're going to tailor your explanation to be entity specific. You're going to focus on the primary government, but you're able to use professional judgment in your determination whether to discuss your discretely presented component units. For example, one of our clients is a county in Virginia. The school system's presented as a discretely presented component unit, and based on the nature and significance of that relationship, they feel it's important to discuss the school system within the MD&A. So they've included that information in there. The next section is your financial summary. This is where condensed information is presented. So you can't just copy and paste your government-wide financial statements here. It must be condensed and follow the elements that are outlined within the standard. And this isn't going to be a significant change, but it just kind of locks in, emphasizes this criteria. So you're still going to present the total assets, deferred outflows, inflows, total liabilities, and so on. The goal here is to present the information needed to support your analysis of the financial position and results of your operations. You're going to cover both the government-wide and the major funds here. And you're presenting the information for your governmental activities and your business type activities. So this is another area that may get overlooked. We have a client that's a retirement system. So all they report is fiduciary funds. So they're pension trust funds. Since they don't have governmental activities or business type activities, they're not required to follow the elements outlined in the condensed financial summary within the standard there. So they'll continue to report those schedules under the previous standards. And one of the biggest changes you'll see within those schedules is going to be a new column, which will display the percent changes from prior year to current year. Next is going to be your detailed analysis of your government-wide and major funds. So here, you're providing analysis of both the financial position and results of operations. Here, you want to provide entity-specific insight. Don't just use generic responses or restate previous narratives. So in addition to reporting the amounts and the percent change, you want to explain the why. So your focus is on significant changes, whether positive or negative. You want to focus on facts, decisions, or conditions that users may not be aware of, understanding that all users may not be from that region or geographical area. You can discuss significant policy changes, such as changes in tax rates, user fees, important economic factors, maybe changes in tax base or employment base that significantly affect the operating results. For each major fund, you're going to summarize the significant changes. Refer elsewhere where you can. We want to avoid duplicative language here. Once again, you're going to explain both the why and the magnitude of those changes. You're also going to present an analysis of the fund balance or net position. GASB calls out addressing restrictions, commitments, assignments that significantly affect the availability of fund resources for future use. And then lastly, they encourage the use of graphs, charts, and tables to enhance the understandability of information. So the fourth section is going to be your significant capital assets and long-term financing activity. With capital assets, you want a description of significant capital asset activity, including intangible assets during the year. So don't forget about your leases, your SPIDAs. You want to discuss significant addition or disposals of capital assets, major capital projects. If there's significant changes in commitments for the acquisition of capital assets, this is where you would address that. There's been significant policy changes or economic activity that would impact capital assets, discuss that here as well. Then on the long-term financing side, you're going to provide a description there as well of activity during the year. You're going to cover not just traditional debt, but you also want to discuss leases, your PPPs, SPIDAs, address agreements entered into during the year, changes in credit ratings, changes in debt limitations, as well as significant policy changes and any economic factors. And this gets us to our last section, the currently known facts, decisions, or conditions. So the emphasis here are those that are expected to have a significant effect on the financial position and changes in operating results. So you want to discuss facts, decisions, or conditions that are going to significantly impact your revenues, expenses, fund balance, or net position. One thing of note here is that this must be the information that's known as of the issuance date, not the date of the financial statement, so not as of fiscal year end, but as of the issuance date or opinion date of the financials. GASB gives different examples here of what can be included. Some of those include trend information, demographic data, such as changes in population, customer bases, enrollment, unemployment rates, factors to develop new budget, amounts available for appropriations, factors resulting in changes in planned spending, whether that's from inflation, contracts, laws, program changes. In other areas, expected changes in net position or fund balance, actions taken that impact your pension or OPEB, capital planning, or any subsequent liabilities, new legislation or regulations. One thing to keep in mind also is that it must be relevant and expected to have a significant influence on future financial position. And as we emphasize throughout this, continue to focus on the why and what that impact will be.
Great, thanks. Scott, I have a question for you in a little bit related to the currently known facts, decisions, and conditions section. But I guess one thing that I wanted to share that was interesting here, besides removing boilerplate language, focusing on the why, being very much more specific to your government. One thing that was interesting is that you just go straight in to the overview of the financial statements. And so those financial highlights that you typically see on that first page, those are now moving into the detailed analysis. So that was also something that was kind of interesting that I saw. So Scott, as we're getting here towards the second quarter of the year, right around the corner for June 30th to start to implement, if they hadn't already, GASB 103. Are you starting to hear of governments using this as a reason to, refresh, update their MD&A, or even in some cases, their entire ACFR?
We're hearing a little bit of that. I think your team has gotten some requests to assist with making MD&As better. And honestly, I review a lot of ACFRs each year, and I see all sorts of different types of MD&As. I see some that are obviously from a template, very bare minimum, check the box type of MD&A. I see some that do a really great job and provide a lot of illustrations and graphics to make it look very good. But I think more should be talking about this refresh right now. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And my worry is that some are not going to look at their MD&A until the end of the process like they've always done, where this MD&A or this GASB 103 is really an opportunity to, we call it get out of jail free, when anytime a standard is issued and we've been doing something wrong and now we can fix it without anybody knowing that we did it wrong before. We're just going to slide it in the correct way now. Starting now, we're going to be doing it right. And this is another one of those opportunities where if you haven't been doing your best on the MD&A, if you haven't been making it a very useful document, this is the time to do that. And you should start early. There's a lot of this MD&A stuff that you can get done now before you've even closed your books, and at least have the frame set up, and even maybe get some extra resources to make it good. Telling your bosses or your elected officials that there's a new standard now, and now we have to do it this way, and making it a lot more useful. So I guess short answer, yes, we've seen some, but not nearly enough. More should be focusing on this now.
Yeah, so to the audience, I made the mistake during our webinar to tell people that it is no longer, you no longer can copy and paste the information in the MD&A as like the last thing you do. And Scott scolded me and said, you weren't supposed to be doing that in the first place, which he's right. But, some of these things you've just been carrying forward. You took a GFOA template 18 years ago and you're just doing the same thing. Let's get it issued at the end, and really encouraged with the governments that we've been talking to already in their desire to put a more concerted effort into it this year. I think it also aligns really well with the project that GFOA is doing around rethinking financial reporting and just creating a better product overall, for our ACFRs and financial statements. I think this would be a good time to transition a little bit into how the Cherry Bekaert CFO Advisory Group is helping to modernize and refresh the MD&A. And one of the things that we've built is an AI assessment. So it's an AI-enabled assessment utilizing a co-pilot agent, so a chat agent that has been taught to read MD&As and score it on 20 critical factors on the areas that Mike just touched on, to give it a score of 1 to 5. 4 is what we're deeming a passing score, but 1, not there, completely lacking. 5, best in class. And it scores these MD&As based off of your fiscal year 2025 ACFR, and it lets you know your starting point. So where you're starting between where you're at with GASB 34 and where you need to be with GASB 103. And from that, we've provided our clients with 2 things. 1, an executive summary of what's strong about your MD&A, what needs to improve, and as well as priority recommendations, as well as a more comprehensive report with all of the answers for here's the 20 things that we evaluated, here's your gap, here's what you need to do to improve your score. And it's really been helpful to give people a roadmap, right? You're not just opening up your 20-page MD&A being like, okay, what do I need to move? What do I need to cut? It's giving people a roadmap to improve. And we've seen a lot of success with it with our early clients. Mike, in performing these assessments, because you're doing a lot of the review of what the AI puts out, has there been anything that's been surprising you in these early implementations that you can share with our audience?
I think it's just realizing how repetitive and boilerplate a lot of these MD&As are. One of the benefits of the AI tool is that it produces results that are entity specific. Then, of course, we follow up with our team behind that and review it against the MD&A and use our professional judgment to make changes to it. But it's going to be more time consuming than a lot of entities realize. A lot of governments realize it's been more time consuming than I initially thought going into it. But it provides a great opportunity to just completely hit the refresh button, almost starting from scratch and doing your best to stick to those 5 sections and see how much fat you can trim during that process. I think a lot of these MD&As have become bloated over the years.
Yep. Yeah. One example of just the copy and pasting, there's a financial highlights section for one of our clients. They listed the 6 things that were most important, the biggest financial highlights, right? and one of the 6 was deferred inflows went up by 0.3%. And this is a large municipal government, and there's no way that one of the 6 most important financial highlights was that, right? But maybe at some point it was carried forward from year to year. So that's another example of things that we're seeing through this process that the tool is pulling out. I hinted earlier, Scott, about one of the other things that surprised me is how there was little to no information in the description for currently known facts, decisions, or conditions. Kind of just, there's like a summary paragraph at the end and it kind of just falls off. How do you think that the examples that GASB has given that Mike alluded to earlier, those 8 examples, will help increase that quality of that information?
I think it's great. To me, this is the best part about the guidance, because before there was very little guidance on what should go into that paragraph. And what I had been seeing in practice is that when someone wanted to include something in their MD&A and it didn't seem to fit any of the other categories, they would just put it in that. And then I would see the exact opposite, where I would see that part be boilerplate. And out of everything, that's the least likely part that should be boilerplate, because you're talking about things that are, actually known and impactful, and that should change every year. There's no reason why that should just be a roll forward from year to year. So the guidance that the GASB has put out for currently known facts, I think is great. It makes it a lot easier to understand what should go into that section and gives you some parameters, understanding that it's not an exclusive list, but just some good examples of the types of things that should go in there.
Thank you, sir. So we are at the end of this podcast on the MD&A and GASB 103, and we like to end our podcast by asking our co-hosts if they have a word of advice for governments as they're implementing whatever we're talking about. So in this case, the MD&A under GASB 103. What is one takeaway, Mike and Scott, that governments should know, apply, be thinking about related to what we just discussed?
Well, I started with concept statement 3. I'm going to end with concept statement 3, where it says a user's interpretation of messages in the financial statements may be affected by a variety of other factors, including the user's past experience and preference, as well as prevailing economic conditions and the availability of relevant information outside of financial report. Meaning users are going to read your financial statements and they're going to interpret a certain way based off of their frame of reference. When you go to GASB 103, it says the MD&A provides finance managers with the opportunity to present analysis of the government's activities. This is management's opportunity to kind of shape the information and to provide their perspective based off of their knowledge of what's going on. And so you should really look at it as that opportunity and a way to really communicate certain things to users that you're not just going to get out of the basic financial statements.
Thank you, sir. Mike?
And my takeaways along the same lines that Scott just mentioned. When you finish updating your MD&A, would a non-accountant be able to read through that and understand the story that you're trying to tell? Would they understand the operations at a high level of the government and what the financial conditions and results were for the year, and why the changes that occurred came to be? The focus should be on someone who's a non-governmental accountant. So as you're working through your analysis, when you're trying to figure out the why, keep that in the back of your mind and try to hit that mark at the end, where if you presented this to someone without an accounting background, would they have a thorough understanding by the end of it?
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for joining me on the first of the 3 podcast series that we're doing here on GASB 103. As you can tell, we've been really digging into this. The tool is working. Clients are excited about it. We're really elevating the MD&As for our clients. If you're curious about learning how we can do that for your government, you can go to the Cherry Bekaert website. You can email any of the 3 of us. I am Danny.Martinez@cbh.com. Mike is mike.brotherton@cbh.com, and Scott is sanderson@cbh.com. Our next two podcasts are going to touch on the proprietary funds and the changes of classification and presentation for the income statement, and budgetary comparison information, moving it to RSI, making sure that we're excluding significant variances. And those should be out, a few weeks after you get this one in the same place that you find your podcast. Also want to let you all know we are going to have a webinar on lessons learned in about a month, and the registration for that is also on our website. If you somehow are listening to this in the future, you should be able to find a recording of that on our website. Thank you again to our co-host for attending. My name is Danny Martinez, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.